guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here. So today the video that I'm gonna make is different than the video I intended to make when I first sat down. But basically, my intention was to make a video about the Gothic books that I've loved and to talk about some Gothic books, seeing as it's this time of year. Gothic books for me are sort of fiction, horror, with bits of death and romance in, but there's definitely that kind of like atmospheric sense to them. So I guess that's kind of how I think of a Gothic book. And so I was looking through the list of my books at which ones that I really loved that I wanted to talk about, and then I realised I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Gothic books, because books that I consider Gothic, half of them I love, I give like 4 or 5 stars, half of them I really don't like and give like 2 stars. And I wanted to talk about that because I think it's really interesting, and I definitely wanted to mention some of my favourites, some of my least favourites, and why I think that I have such a disparaging view on them. So I will start firstly by talking about my kind of inspiration, I guess. So basically I love reading Gothic books in principle. There are some that I've really enjoyed, and I definitely enjoy the idea of them. However, I often find the execution is not great. I think one of the reasons why is that I personally, and I would love your recommendations because that's definitely something I've struggled with, is that I've struggled to find modern Gothic novels. Most of the Gothic novels that I've read are written in like the 1800s, which is fine, I love a classic, but I think that tends to be where my issue is, because when a Gothic book has lots of atmosphere and it's really intricate and really interesting and very atmospheric and kind of dark, and it has really classic language, I struggle with that, because I think sometimes I want one or the other. I don't want both, because I think the two together can be really difficult to read and takes me forever to read, so I'm not likely to sort of pick them up. So yeah, that's kind of the issue I have, I think. So I wanted to talk firstly about some that I don't think have worked, and then I'll talk about some that I do think have worked. So one of the first ones for me that didn't work, and I will also say that I do plan on rereading this one, probably not this year, maybe next year, but that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I know that Frankenstein obviously is like a cult classic and everybody seems to love it. However, I personally couldn't get on with the writing style. And again, I loved the atmosphere and I loved the message behind it. I think it's a great book for that reason, but the writing and the language I didn't like, and that took me away from the story and just made me not enjoy it at all. So I do really want to try it again and see how I feel, but I definitely think that that's the issue I had with it. It was definitely Gothic and had that horror vibe and that kind of like death romance kind of vibe, but I just didn't enjoy the writing style, and so for me I just wasn't wanting to pick it up every time. Another one I had the same sort of problem with was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I think I count this as kind of Gothic. I assume that's right. If you don't know, The Picture of Dorian Gray follows a man who basically falls in love with a picture of himself, and it's really difficult to explain. And again, there are some great principles in here and great morals, and it's got a great message, but the writing style for me, I just found myself so bored with it. I just couldn't be bothered, and I just really hated it. And I think that's sometimes the point. If I like a Gothic book as well that doesn't, I think it doesn't, if it has a really strong like message and moral to it, I struggle to read that with the difficult flowery language, with the kind of Gothic atmospheric element, and I think the whole lot together is too much for me. So yeah, that's kind of an issue I had with The Picture of Dorian Gray as well. And then the third one that I wanted to talk about that I had some kind of issues with, I guess, was the Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which I don't think is stereotypically Gothic, but I kind of get the Gothic vibes to it personally. This one again was set in a different country, so it was very interesting and it was very different in that way, and I did enjoy that. But I did again find that the writing wasn't quite what I was after, and I think I gave it like 3 or 4 stars, I can't remember, and I did enjoy it a lot, don't get me wrong, but the Gothic element to it, I didn't quite get the same thing. So I think that, I feel like of the 3 things that are in it, only 1 or 2 of them tend to succeed for me, and that's what I struggle with, I think. But I do want to talk about 4 that have worked for me, and 3 of those are by the same author. So 3 of them are by Daphne du Maurier, and I've only read 3 Daphne du Maurier books, and I've loved all of them, and I wanted to talk about them today. I've definitely mentioned her, and I've spoken about her a lot in videos, but the first one is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This was the first du Maurier I read, and I will say that I initially thought that this one was not going to be one that I enjoyed very much, because the first 100 pages had the same problem that I had with Frankenstein and The Picture of Dorian Gray and The Shadow of the Wind. It was very wordy. The atmosphere wasn't there for me in the first 100 pages, and I didn't enjoy it. In fact, I nearly DNF'd it. It was only because I was doing a buddy read with a load of people on Twitter that I actually continued and finished it, because yeah, and I loved it by the end. I loved it after the first 100 pages, but the setup was what I didn't enjoy. And I think that's what puts me off. If the first 100 pages is boring, or the setup is just really uninteresting to me, I will DNF it. And even if it does have the Gothic feel, sometimes I find that Gothic books sometimes are too descriptive in that way. Like, I don't mind description, but I need a story as well. And sometimes I think that's where I've struggled. But yeah, so that was, Rebecca was great and I loved it, but that was definitely a problem I had initially. But then the story kind of kicks in, and that's where I was really interested. However, the other 2 Daphne du Maurier books I read I think were really good, and they worked really well. So the first one I want to talk about is Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. This one follows a main character named Mary Yellen, who goes to live with her aunt and her aunt's husband when her mother dies. And this one started off with story, so it talks about why she's going. It starts off basically with her in a carriage and she's on her way to Jamaica Inn. And the atmosphere was there, the Gothicness was there, because it was talking about like the moors and her travelling and things, but there was also story along with that, because the coachmaster basically was warning her against going, because there was really bad like issues with the Jamaica Inn, and lots of bad things had happened. And then she gets there and she meets her aunt, who's used to be this really bubbly and effervescent woman, who is now completely beaten down by this man, and the inn just seems really dark and mysterious, and I really loved this one. I think also what's great about some Gothic novels that's not great about others is the characters that I really enjoyed quite a few of the characters in this book, and I think that was great. Even though they're kind of like Gothic and mysterious, I really liked this. I found it really intriguing and absolutely loved it. So this one definitely was a massive success for me. And then the other one that I read, and I read this one last month and I absolutely loved it. This is my favourite du Maurier by far. This one is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, and again this had both elements. So it starts off with the main character Philip and his I don't really know how you would describe the guy who he is talking to. It starts off talking about the main character Philip and his cousin Ambrose, and Ambrose is like the guy who looks after him and becomes like, he's a massive part in his life. You very much get the story side of that, which I really enjoyed. And then from there, it then becomes a different type of story. So then you have like the description and the Gothic side and the feeling, and then basically Ambrose goes abroad and marries a woman and he dies, and it's then about the suspicion that Ambrose has against Rachel, who is his new wife. And yeah, it's really wonderful, and again I think it's definitely it's an interesting read, and it just has the atmosphere that I really wanted with a Gothic novel, but it definitely has a story, and I think that's why it was so successful to me. And I think it does have that morality idea. It does have the kind of like main message, which I think has not been so successful in other books like I've mentioned earlier. And yeah, I just think this one was really successful and I absolutely loved it. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is my favourite classic of all time. So this has classic, it has Gothic, it has female main character that I adore and think she's wonderful. It has, you know, a Gothic atmosphere. It has an old creepy house. It has a really great romance. It has death. It has creepiness. It has everything, and it's really successful. And you probably all know what I'm about to say. This is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and this is, like I said, by far my favourite classic of all time. I've probably read this one upwards of 10 times. I absolutely love this book, and this has everything I want for a Gothic novel, and I don't know what it is about this that's so successful when the others aren't. I feel like it's because the plot is more interesting and there's more intricate things, and I think for me that's the thing. So in Rebecca, in Jamaica Inn, in My Cousin Rachel, in Jane Eyre, they've all got very interesting plots that go along with that Gothicness. I feel like Frankenstein, The Picture of Dorian Gray, The Shadow of the Wind, I think there is a story there, but it's not as prominent as I would hope for it to be. I feel like it's more Gothic-y than it is anything else. So this for me was the most successful one because there's a really interesting story, but it also has all those other elements that I'm looking for in a Gothic novel. So this one is definitely amazing. So there you have it, guys. I think this is a really interesting question. Let me know what you think about Gothic novels. Do you have the same love-hate relationship? Have you read any of these ones I've talked about and loved and hated them, or do you just love them all? Do you hate them all? Let me know. I'm really, really interested. I'd love to have a discussion with you because I find the whole thing really interesting, and I didn't really realise quite what my thoughts were on Gothic novels until basically I sat down and started talking. So do let me know what you think about it. Today my video shout out is going to be for the wonderful chanelletime. chanelletime is one of my favourite channels. I think she's a wonderful booktuber. She's really, really open and I love her. I watched her Halloween October TBR, and every book she talks about I'm like, I want to read. She's so she's really funny, and I think that every time I watch her videos I just laugh. I think she's just wonderful, and I would very much recommend that you go and watch her. Also check out her Twitter because her Twitter is really funny, but I'll link that down below for you. But yeah, definitely go and check out Chanel's channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I shall see you next time for another video. Bye guys!